Okay, so like most projects, we start the sawmill. So a little backstory on this: the client hit me up, said they need 9 new tables tops for their restaurant, and I've done work for this client in the past. And I went to the sawmill, and they only had rustic white oak 4/4. And I called the client while I was there, sent him some pictures, as you saw from the first pictures in this video. And the client was kind of in a rush, and they didn't want to wait for a couple weeks for the clear to come in. So they said, work my magic. So I had to take this very rustic wood. It's a lot more work for me, but it was also a little cheaper in materials since it wasn't clear. So we get the wood home, and first thing we're going to do is start cutting down the rough length. So these dimensions are going to be 30 by 22, roughly, and so we're going to cut these roughly around 31, 31 and a half, and try to pick out the best pieces out of this. Like I said, there's a lot of knots. There's some checking, some cupping, mainly knots. There's not a lot of cupping, but there was some knots, but some unevenness. So we're going to try to cut around as much of the checks and cracks as we can, and some of the bigger knots that we can. So that's what we're doing here. So first we take the track saw, as you saw, and we're going to cut down some of the longer boards. Then we'll take them over to the miter saw and start cutting down to the rough length. Get them broken down to rough length of dimensions, so it's easier to handle to go through our jointer, go through the table saw, and go through the planer. Going through with 30-inch pieces is a lot easier, especially on my jointer, than it would be 10-foot pieces. So it's just a lot easier to do it this way. It's got to be careful with the miter saw, since you could have a kickback, since this wood isn't real straight. But I just took my time with it and cut down the manageable pieces. And once I was able to do that, it went pretty smooth from this standpoint. But there's a lot of work to be done here, and this is where we're going to pick up. We're going to start just really just milling this up, these long boards. Like I said, just cutting out as much of the checks and the junk that I don't want. So I bought extra lumber for this project just because of that. So, and always take that in consideration when you're doing projects like this with the woods. They call it rustic. That's the air quotes there. Then make sure you buy extra wood to offset some of your, not just mistakes, but like to cut around and get the best use out of your product. And especially if it's a little cheaper than if I would have bought a clear white oak. It would have been a lot more expensive, but it would have been a lot less work. So the cost, for me, didn't go down, essentially, because it was a lot more work working with this lumber than it would have been if I would have got some 4/4 clear oak without all the knots. Just pretty much run through the planer, cut down, and glue up. Took a lot more work. So that's what we're doing here. It's a lot of repetition, doing a lot of cutting. It's about, I want to say 12 boards or so that we had to get, and now we're cutting these all down. And that's what we're doing here. Okay, so now we need to try to get a straight edge, and this is one of the things I like to do. I like to take a known good straight edge, like a level or something, and put it on the ends of the boards. We know these aren't straight, so we're just trying to find the more straight edge that's going to be easier to run through the jointer, a little less work, and try to get that one straight edge before we run into the table saw. So it's a nice little tip, at least I like to use. You can see the light there. You can see that there's a gap, especially in the center. It's almost like a crescent moon shape on some of these boards. Some are a little different. So I marked the side that I'm going to joint. Just makes it a little easier. The faces are pretty straight. I will say that's the one thing about this project. I didn't really have much cupping or much twisting at all. These were just very knotty and has some checks and cracks. Otherwise, they're pretty straight. I don't have to use
pretty straight.
Painted jigs or anything. They're fairly straight. As long as I was able to skip clean them and run to the jointer, get straight edge, it made it a lot easier. So now we got to measure this along and try to get it in stacks before we take them over to the table saw. Okay, you can probably see here, I'm adjusting the fence on each cut. So here's the issue we had with these. So these boards were all different widths. So some were 10 and a half, some were closer to 12. So we got to match these up to make them equal out to 22. So as you see here, I'm going to try to get a straight edge, and then we're going to start marking and labeling each one. It equals out to 22. And these all said and done, they're going to be just under 22. They're going to be like 21, like maybe 14 sixteenths, because we got to get a straight edge. So we're going to run these jointers again later, just to make sure that our edges are straight. Like I said, we're going to, so this would made this job a lot harder, because I had to go and match up everything and label them, and then relabel on the edges here, as you'll see as we're starting to run through the planer, because obviously if we, label the face, it's going to be gone. So that's what we're doing here. We're going to run these through the planer. These go through pretty good. I just skip planing these to get a straight face and bottom. And once we do that, it just kind of was a lot of repetition, like I said, this project. And then we're going to label, like I said, so I know, say A1 or A2 go together, and then D1, D2, etc. So the next thing we're going to do here, and I probably didn't have to do this, but at least at this stage, but I don't have a drum sander. So and my planer is only 13 inches wide. So these boards, obviously, after they're laminated, I'm not going to be able to run them to the planer again. I do have a friend with a drum sander, but I know he's been very busy lately, so I didn't want to, bother him with this, because I didn't really need it. These weren't that big where I couldn't get these flat, but I had to fill these knots in with some epoxy. So what I'm just doing here, I'm just going to use some Total Boat resin and hardener. It's a 1-to-1 mix, and I'm just adding some black dye. I think it's called eye candy or something candy. I'll have to link it. But either way, so I just mix this dye with it, so it will be black. And I'm just going to put these, fill these knots in for now, so that way I can run these through the planer after they dry overnight. So we're going to do, so we're going to break this up in sections here. So we're going to do a few here, and then we're going to laminate, and then we're going to do the next set. So I only have a certain amount of clamps, as you'll see later in the video. So it makes sense to kind of just break this up into sections. Since there's 9 tables, we could do 3 and 3 and 3, or 4, 4, and 1, whatever. Depending on space and availability. And also, it's pretty cold. Even though I have a little heat in my shop, it's not great. And I also leave the door open a lot, since it gives me more, I like the natural daylight, and also it gives me more space, I feel like. I don't feel as claustrophobic in my tight shop. So here's what we're doing here. We're just going to fill these knots with some epoxy, let these sit, and then we're going to, the next day, 24 hours later, we're going to run them through the planer, clean them up, and then we'll do the same thing over again with the next set of boards, and then we'll start getting ready to do our lamination section. So you see we're going to run through the joiner again, so I want to make sure I have airtight seams here, and make sure everything's labeled still, and we want everything to equal out to about 22 inches, which we're doing here, which is very important. So for this, we're going to be using biscuits. I was thinking about using Domino's or Dale's, but the biscuits I seem to have the most luck with alignment. It's the easiest, and I just think it's the best solution for me. Domino's, sometimes you got to really fight it and force it, especially with 1-inch boards. I think it's a little overkill also, and these are pretty, like I said, pretty straight. I use some calls too. Didn't need them for all the boards, but like I said, it is very cold. So we're going to glue these up, and we're going to really clamp them pretty good, though, and we're going to have them sit overnight. Again, so like I said, we're going to do this in sections. And that's what we're doing here. We're going to glue up a first set of tables, tops, and then we're going to let them sit, and then we're going to go on and move on to our next sets. Okay, so here we're going to be bouncing around a little bit. So we're going to take some of these tops that are out of clamps and we're going to start cleaning them up. We're going to run a little hand plane over some of this, so some high spots, especially the glue joint. And on the bottom of these, we're going to run an electric hand plane just to get any unevenness out, especially, like I said, the glue joint. Even though we had calls and biscuits, we still had, just sitting when you clamp up. I had really had to put some hard pressure on these just because of the temperature, to make sure these really sealed good. So that's what we're doing here. So we're just going to clean these up. So nothing we're going to be doing. Any of these small little knots or imperfections, we're going to fill in with some CA glue, black thick set CA glue with some activator, and just fill these in. And then we're going to start getting ready to cut these down to the final length. Now, sometimes I will stack boards on top of each other and cut like multiple boards at a time. But since these aren't set to the final width yet, I'm just going to do one at a time here. We're getting towards the end of this project, and the client wants these tables, this coming Monday. So I have a couple days to get this done. I don't want to make any mistakes. So we're going to do one at a time. Yeah, it's a little boring. We're going to be just kind of cutting one end, flipping it over, then measuring out to our final length, and then cutting it to the final length with the track saw, which we're doing here. As long as we make sure we're straight and we're square, this makes pretty easy work. I'm going to have to go get the square tool for this track guide to make it a little easier. I haven't got one yet, so I'm just using like a regular square just to line it up and clamp it. But I think I'm going to get that extension for at least a small one here, which would definitely be helpful for jobs like this, especially when you're doing commercial work like this. You want to be as fast as possible, especially when you have deadlines to meet. So you want to be consistent and fast without taking shortcuts. So whatever little jigs and tools you can have, these are the little quick tips when you're running a small business. Is good to have that handy. You can speed up your process without cutting corners. It's very helpful for you. So just keep that in mind when you're doing multiple projects like this, especially like big projects like this. And these are going to be going to the restaurant, so I want to make sure these are perfect as much as possible for what I have to work with. So that's what we're doing here. So that's why we're just going to kind of be following the same steps. So, and we're going to be bouncing around because we're going to be doing, let's say, 3 tables, then going on to 3 tables, pulling out of clamps, then clamping up another 2 or 3 tables, then doing the same thing. So we're going to be bouncing around, like I said, just to get these nice and perfect, and then we're going to start sanding more detailed later. Okay, so here we're going to take these through the table saw. Some needs to get these to the final width. So now we're at the final width and the final length. We are ready to start cleaning these up. So I like to water pop these first, just get any scratch marks out. It helps me identify the scratch marks. Also previews what your table is going to look like when you put your finish on. So that way we know how it's going to look, and if we can find like the scratch marks, and also makes it easier to get rid of them too. So another thing we're going to do here, and this I don't do this very often, because I don't have a bandsaw either. So it's one of the things on my bucket list. So I just need a bigger shop to fit some of the stuff. So we're going to be doing some makeshift bow ties for this. We're going to be doing this because some of these cracks on the bottom, on the other side of the table, it won't be seen. So they don't have to be perfect, but I want to try to help prevent these checks or cracks from getting worse. So we're going to be putting some little bow ties in, and I'm just going to be taking some scrap wood I have left over, and it's going to cut them to close to a bow tie shape as I can, with a jigsaw and also a little bench sander. And then we're going to just tap these in with some CA glue and some activator, and also some regular glue, and let these sit and just fill in any of these gaps around it. And then we'll plane and sand it down. And we're going to be doing this back and forth. We're going to do this on a couple of these tables. We're just going to mark out, and then I'm just going to run a little router and just clean these up. And then tap these in. Like I said, it just makes it a little easier to do this for me. I need to get a better process for this, obviously. So this kind of slowed me down a little bit, but this is one of the things you have to deal with when you don't have perfect wood. You don't want these things splitting over time, especially with the temperature changes and the environment. So I have tables that are on site there now for about a year or so. So far so good. I haven't had any issues. So hopefully this will be the same with this. But that wood was a little clearer in the past. So these will look just as good when I'm done. Probably even better in a way, because I like the epoxy on some of these, even though you can barely see it at the end. But some of these have a little more than others, and just looks good to me. I like the look, even though I'm not an epoxy guy. I don't like epoxy, but sometimes with natural wood it looks good as long as it's not too much. So here we're going to run a round over on all these bottoms and tops of these edges and just soften up these like we did for the other tables to make them look the same. And then we're going to do our final sanding and more water pops also too, just to clean up any scratch marks and clean up any dust. And then we're going to run through our final sanding, get a good finish sanding here, and then pretty much almost done this. We're going to just put some finish on. And the finish we're going to use is going to be using some Osmo. I'd like to use the Osmo Poly X. So you can see here we have some scratches I'm finding on some of these. So we're going to do another water pop and then sand them. And then once we're done this, we can clean them up one more time. Then, like I said, we're going to put some finish on, and we're going to use an Osmo Poly X. And I like to just put the Osmo one with like a Scotch Brite pad, buff it in. You can use a buffer also.
Okay, I'm
just going to do it manually, and then we're going to
one clamp.
Then wipe off the excess, and you'll see that in a couple minutes.
A lot of sanding.
So you can see here I'm going to apply Osmo, and I like to seal both sides just to keep it protected and sealed, and also it just makes it look nicer. And people, will rub underneath sometimes at on tables, so you want to make sure that they're as perfect as possible on both sides. Obviously, the show side is going to be facing up, so it's nicer, and I'll do more coats on the show side. But the bottom I will put one coat on just to help seal it. So here we're just going to, like I said, buff it in. With the Scotch Brite pad, we're rubbing it in real good. You don't need too much. We're going to be using satin, Poly X satin Osmo, and then we're going to just be wiping off the excess with a lint-free cloth, and that's pretty much it. They came out very nice. The client loved them. We went on site and installed them, and we'll get into that in a couple seconds. I couldn't video too much there because they had music start playing in the restaurant because we were working on the second floor, but the first floor was open. So I couldn't video too much, so we're just taking these pedestal stains apart, and we're going to just use some threaded inserts for these, and then install them with the threaded inserts while these are facing, top up or top down, and just put these in. So there's 9 of them, and like I said, we're just putting these pedestal bases together, and then just inserting them onto the tops. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I couldn't video too much of this part. I was just really busy on site. And also with the music, I couldn't really show too much. But this is pretty much the gist of it. Once we get these up and installed, we'll wipe it down, vacuum, clean up our mess, pack up our tools, and pretty much call it a day. If you have any questions, let me know. This proves you could do big projects with small shops, and you don't need industrial tools to do this. Just got to, hard work and some sweat equity. You can get some stuff done, and these projects came out very nice, and the client loved them, and that's which is important. And I secured more work for them. I'll have probably another video coming out. All right, thanks for watching.